So we're talking about ways that things can get in and out of a cell. And so one thing is that things can just diffuse in or diffuse out, going from a high concentration to a low concentration. And that's true whether we're looking at things that are dissolved, solutes, things like salt or sugar or hormones or whatever, or if we're thinking about water. Same idea, just a little bit harder to think through with water. So now what we're going to do is go back to other ways that things move through cells. So we've got simple diffusion, and then we talked about osmosis, which is the diffusion of water. And now we have a couple of others to look at. If the cell needs it and it can't go through the lipid bilayer, how does it get into or out of the cell? So hopefully you remember what the cell membrane looks like, and you can think of something else that's in the cell membrane that can bring stuff in and out if the lipid bilayer can't. So it moves through a protein. Or sometimes it's engulfed, which means I've shown you this before when a cell will engulf or take in a bunch of bacteria, for example. So the next one is facilitated diffusion. This is different from simple diffusion because with simple diffusion, it goes right through the lipid bilayer. With facilitated diffusion, it's facilitated. That means to be helped. And so it's being helped by a protein. So this is facilitated diffusion. Still diffusion because it's going high to low, doesn't take any energy, but facilitated or helped because it's going through a protein. So this uses transport proteins. There are other kinds of proteins in the cell membrane, but a transport protein transports or moves stuff. So it moves stuff from a high concentration to a low concentration. And this does not require energy because, again, you're just going from high concentration where there's a ton to low concentration. So glucose might be something that goes through a protein like that. Examples would include glucose or amino acids moving from blood where there would be a high concentration into a cell where there would be a low concentration. So again, pause the video if you need to write this stuff down. I want to explain a little bit. Glucose and amino acids are polar, and so they cannot move right through the lipid bilayer because they're pretty big and they're polar, so they're going to need to move through a protein. So that would be facilitated diffusion. So types of transport proteins in the cell membrane. There are some ones that are called channel or pore proteins, and they look sort of like a toilet paper tube. And so here's the lipid bilayer. And a pore protein just has a hole in it, and stuff just goes right through. It has to be the right size for whatever. It's pretty specific. It has to be the right size for letting in whatever it's letting in. So let's say this is for sodium, and so this is going to allow sodium to travel through. It has to have exactly the right size, and it has to be the right charges to let sodium through. So it looks, like I said, that looks like a toilet paper tube. And then there are carrier proteins. They're a little bit different. They can actually change shape to move stuff from one side of the membrane to the other. So here's your lipid bilayer, and a carrier protein might look something like this. So here's the lipid bilayer. Takes a while to draw all their tails. Anyway, it can change shape. So something can come in this side, and then this thing can just change shape to be more like this, and all of a sudden this thing is on the other side of the membrane. So let's look at that. I hope this works. You can see stuff going from a high concentration to a low concentration. So this can go in either direction, but if there's a high concentration here, more of it's going to go out on that side. So molecules will randomly move through the pores in channel proteins or pore proteins from, again, high concentration to low concentration. It does not take any energy to do that. And here's a carrier protein that will take something from one side and move, change shape, and release it on the other side. So these are proteins, some of the carrier proteins that actually don't extend through the entire lipid bilayer. They just kind of move within it, which is kind of different. So they bond and drag molecules through the lipid bilayer and release them on the opposite side. And so here's one of the ones that I had drawn earlier. There's lots of stuff in here, and this thing just keeps changing shape, and these molecules kind of randomly bounce in, and when they do, it changes shape and lets them out on the other side. So other carrier proteins change shape to move materials across the cell membrane. And I think this is a video that's not going to work. Okay, so the next type is called active transport. Active requires ATP. It's, if you think of the difference between being passive and active, if you're passive, you're sitting on the couch doing nothing. If you're active, you're going out, running around, playing sports or whatever it is that you do. Active can actually, active requires energy and it does something that takes energy. So if you take a look at this, there's a lot more of these purple things here than here. But your cell will actually take them and shove them all over here. So it'll take every last one of these things and shove them over here. That takes energy. That's like, if you remember the perfume bottle that I drew earlier, remember how I opened it and things just diffused out from where there's a ton of them, the high concentration to the low? Active transport is like taking those molecules that have spread out and shoving them all back in. That's a crazy thing, but your body does it all the time, which is, I think, absolutely amazing. So this one requires energy in the form of ATP. It moves materials from, ready? Low concentration to high concentration. This is opposite from what you've learned so far, right? So this is the first one that requires energy, and it goes in the opposite way. So this would actually be going up a concentration gradient. So this is, if you think of a concentration gradient as like a mountain physically, you're going from low to high, you're going up a concentration gradient, or against a concentration gradient. Whoa! So this is moving against, yep, against a concentration gradient. Think of it also, you can think of it as a river and things just kind of flowing downstream. What's happening with active transport is it's being shoved the opposite way, which is kind of weird. So examples include the sodium-potassium pump. You need that in all your nerve cells and in your muscle cells. And it goes against strong concentration gradients. The sodium-potassium pump shoves all the sodium in one way and all the potassium another way. So here's a neuron in your brain or maybe your peripheral nerves. And sodium would be these. And potassium, let's see. Let's get another color that's different, green, I guess. Potassium would be this. And so the idea here is if a purple one went out, if a green one, if a potassium went out there, and what color was I? Whoops, and let's say a purple one went in there, the sodium-potassium pump would force this one out and that one in. So that's against the concentration gradient because you're shoving all the green ones in and all the purple ones out. Whoops.
The cell may need.
And so this one might come out. I'm hoping this comes out on this video. So this little circle thing is ATP, and it's showing that this protein, when it attaches to the ATP, will change shape. And so it's moving sodium one direction and potassium the other direction. Oops. So the potassium's going this way, sodium's this way. So did I say that right? 3 sodiums are moved this way and 2 potassiums are moved that way. So 3 potassiums pumped in for every 2 potassiums pumped out.
The cell may need.
And I'll show you that video in class. Okay. So 3 forms of transport across the membrane so far. We've looked at simple diffusion, which is just going from a high concentration to a low concentration. And the thing with this one, first of all, it's simple because it's going through the lipid bilayer, and it's diffusion because it's going high to low. Then we looked at facilitated diffusion. That's also going high to low. So same thing. That's why you can still call them both diffusion. This one's facilitated, meaning it's helped. So you need this protein to help it. Otherwise, these things are just too polar. They cannot go through that lipid part. And then so those are both passive, no ATP required. The last one that we've talked about so far is active transport. That goes against a concentration gradient. So whether you're bringing stuff out of a cell or into a cell, it really doesn't matter what direction it's going. What matters is how much stuff is there. So if you have more stuff here and less stuff here, but you're shoving every last one in one direction, that's called active transport, and you need energy for that. That takes ATP. So quiz time. Which type of transport requires energy? So only active transport so far. Which type of transport is the diffusion of water? So that's a special type of simple diffusion. It's called osmosis. Which type of transport occurs when oxygen moves from a high concentration to a low concentration across a lipid bilayer? So it's going across the lipid bilayer, not across a protein. So I can get rid of facilitated. And let's see, you're going high to low, so I can get rid of active. And so it's not water that we're talking about, it's oxygen, so that one is simple diffusion. Which type of transport occurs when sodium ions move from a high concentration to a low concentration through a membrane protein? So they're going through a protein right now. Sodium ions are just too charged to go through those adorable little phospholipid molecules. This stuff, remember, is all nonpolar, so charged stuff cannot go through that. So it's going through a protein instead. Maybe something like this. That means it's being helped, so that's facilitated. And it's going high to low, so that's diffusion. Which type of transport occurs when potassium ions move from a low concentration to a high concentration through a membrane protein? Now here's the difference. You're going low to high. That's the weird way. That's shoving all of the perfume molecules right back, every single one of them, right back into the perfume bottle. And that takes energy. That one's called active transport. Which type of transport can move materials against a concentration gradient? Okay, so the river's flowing this way, that's the natural flow, and I'm shoving stuff the opposite way. That must be the hard one to do. That's active transport. Which type of transport requires a protein carrier but does not require energy? That's just regular old diffusion that's helped with a protein. So that's facilitated diffusion. You should really remember you should be pausing this to think of your answers before you hear my answers. Which types of transport do not require a protein? No protein at all would be simple diffusion and beat me to it, and osmosis. There are proteins that can transport water, but here's the crazy thing. Remember, this lipid bilayer is made out of lipids in the middle, and so those things, I've been drilling this into your head, those things don't mix with water, so water shouldn't be able to go through. But it's thought that water is so small that it actually kind of can squeeze through. All right, and that's it for right now.